Ever catch yourself kind of zoning out during your morning routine? Like you're making coffee, but not really thinking about it.
Oh, yeah.
It's
Okay.
almost like you're on autopilot,
Right.
right?
Definitely. We've all been there.
Well, that, my friend, is the sneaky power of habits at work. And today we're going deep on this, diving into Atomic Habits by James Clear to uncover how these tiny, often overlooked actions can totally reshape our lives.
And what's fascinating is how much we tend to overestimate what we can achieve with one big push. But then we underestimate the massive impact of those small, consistent actions over time.
It's so true. It's like everyone wants the overnight success story, but they don't see the years of hustle behind it, right? But okay, how does this actually work? Like one day you're just going through the motions and then bam, you're a whole new you.
Well, not exactly bam, but I see what you mean. Clear uses this great analogy of an ice cube to explain this. He calls it the plateau of latent potential. So imagine you're slowly heating up an ice cube. Nothing much seems to be happening at first, right? But then, bam, you hit that magic temperature of 32 degrees.
And it starts to melt.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Suddenly, it's not just about warmer ice. It's a complete transformation, a change of state.
Okay, I'm with you, but how does a melting ice cube relate to, say, finally achieving a goal I've been putting off? Like actually sticking to that new workout plan or finally finishing that novel I started ages ago.
It's all about those consistent, everyday efforts. Think about it. You've been wanting to insert listener's goal here for a while now, right? Maybe some days it feels like you're barely making a dent, but every single step you take, every action you take is like raising the temperature of that ice cube. You're moving towards that tipping point, that moment where everything shifts, even if you can't see it just yet.
So it's more about trusting the process than expecting some overnight miracle transformation.
Exactly. And this is where our sense of identity comes into play.
Our identity. You mean like who we believe we are?
Absolutely. Cleary argues that it's not just about changing your actions, it's about changing your beliefs about yourself. He says, and I love this quote, each time you write a page, you are a writer.
Whoa. So it's not just about wanting to be a writer, it's about actually embodying that identity, even if it's just writing a sentence a day.
Precisely. You're proving to yourself one action at a time who you are.
This is blowing my mind. Okay, so we've got these tiny changes, these small steps that build up over time, but what's the science behind it? How do habits actually become hardwired into our brains? Like, how do we go from consciously doing something to it becoming almost automatic?
Great question. Clear breaks this down into what he calls the habit loop. It's a four-step process. Cue, craving, response, reward.
Okay, I love a good framework. Break it down for me.
Okay, let's take something we can all relate to. That late night scroll through social media, right? Think about your own habits for a second. What's the cue? Maybe it's seeing your phone light up with a notification. That's your cue. And then what happens?
Oh man, I know exactly what happens. It's like this instant FOMO, right? Like I
Yeah.
need to know who commented or what I missed.
Exactly. That's the craving kicking in. It's that little itch of, I got to see what's going on.
So then what? Unlock my phone, start scrolling, and boom, down the rabbit hole I go.
There you go. That's it. That's the response, the action you take because of that craving.
Right.
And the reward, well, you get that little hit of dopamine, that feeling of being connected, even if it's just for a fleeting moment.
It's scary how accurate that is, but it
Yep.
can't be that simple, right? It's got to be more to it than just those 4 steps.
Oh, there's always more to uncover. Let's think about a more intense example from the book, like a paramedic responding to an emergency. They see a patient with a certain look on their face, hear their breathing, those are the cues, right? And instantly, their training kicks in. The craving to act, to use their skills, takes over. The response is immediate, honed from countless repetitions. They follow their protocols, administer aid.
And the reward, hopefully, is saving a life. That's intense.
Exactly. And what's fascinating is that these habit loops, these automatic processes, are running in the background all the time, even in seemingly insignificant moments. Think about those little routines you do without even thinking about them.
You mean like how I always check for my keys, wallet, phone before I leave the house? It's like a mental checklist I didn't even realize I created.
That's it. That's your brain's way of making sure you're prepared for the day. A habit loop that's meant to keep you on track. Now, imagine if we could harness that power, that ability to automate actions for any goal we set our minds to.
Okay, now that would be game-changing. But here's the million-dollar question. If these habits are so ingrained, how do we break the bad ones and actually build those better, healthier habits? Because let's be real, it feels like my brain is pretty stuck in its ways sometimes.
And that's where the real magic of atomic habits comes in. It's not just about understanding how habits work, it's about learning how to design them, engineer them to work for us, not against us.
All right, so we're back and ready to unlock the secrets to hacking those habits for good. Like, how do we actually reprogram our brains to make those better choices? The ones that actually get us closer to our goals.
Well, remember how we talked about those cues, those triggers that kickstart the habit loop?
Yeah, like the phone notification that sends me down that social media rabbit hole.
Exactly. Well, our brains are hardwired to pay attention to what's obvious, those things that are right there in our faces all the time.
So it's like out of sight, out of mind. Like, if I hide the cookies, I won't be tempted to eat them.
Precisely. If you want to make good habits stick, you got to make them obvious. Clear even talks about this study where they simply made energy usage visible in homes. And guess what? People started using less energy just by being able to see their habits in action.
Whoa, so just by bringing it out into the open, it changes your behavior.
Exactly. Instead of relying on willpower alone, which, let's be honest, can be pretty flimsy sometimes, we can actually design our environment to support those good habits.
Okay, I'm liking where this is going. So instead of fighting against myself, I can set myself up for success.
Exactly. Think about it this way. What if you strategically place those cues for your desired habits, the ones you want to do more of, in plain sight? Like, let's say you're trying to read more. What if, instead of having that book hidden away on a shelf somewhere, it was sitting right there on your pillow, staring you in the face? Kind of hard to ignore, right?
Oh, okay, that's a good one. I'm totally guilty of stacking books on my nightstand with the best of intentions, but then, well, Netflix happens. But that makes sense. So designing our environment is key. But what about when you're actually trying to break a bad habit? Is it the same idea?
Same principle, but in reverse. You increase the friction, make that bad habit harder to do. Clear gives this great example of relocating to break old patterns. Like, if your phone is your biggest downfall and you constantly find yourself scrolling mindlessly, what if you tried keeping it in a drawer in another room? At least for part of the day, out of sight, out of mind.
I can see how that would make a difference. Like, if it's not right there begging for my attention, I'm way less likely to give in to that temptation. And then it makes it that much easier to focus on, well, anything else, really.
Exactly. And you know what? Are you ready for another game-changing strategy from Atomic Habits? It's called temptation bundling.
Temptation bundling. Okay, now you've got my attention. That sounds kind of, I don't know, sneaky,
Yeah.
but in a good way.
It's all about linking something you want to do with something you need to do. So, let's say, for example, you love listening to podcasts. Who doesn't? But you also know you should be moving your body more. Okay, so what if you make a rule for yourself? You only listen to your favorite podcasts while you're walking, running, or at the gym.
Okay, that is brilliant. I'm already picturing myself crushing miles on the treadmill while I listen to the next episode of, well, this podcast, of course. But seriously, that's so smart. You're turning something you might dread into something you actually look forward to. Like, you're making the need more appealing by pairing it with something fun.
Exactly. You're basically hacking your brain's reward system and using it to your advantage.
Love it. Okay, so we've got the cues, we've got our environment working for us, and now this brilliant temptation bundling strategy. I'm feeling more motivated already. But what about the actual doing of the habit? Like, how do we go from thinking about a habit to, actually making it stick, making it a part of who we are?
That, my friend, is where the power of repetition comes in. And here's a little secret. It's not about being perfect. It's about being consistent.
So it's better to show up consistently, even if it's just for a short burst, than to go all in for a week and then burn out. Asking for a friend.
You got it. And that's where one of my favorite strategies from Atomic Habits comes in, the 2-minute rule.
All right, spill the tea. What's the 2-minute rule, and how can it help me finally stick to those habits? Okay, back again and ready to hear about this last tool for making those habits stick. You said something about accountability before the break, right?
Right. And it ties into what we were just talking about, with consistency and all. Because sometimes those long-term rewards, they just feel so far off,
Tell me about it. It's like, I know I should meditate every day for that long-term peace and focus, but some mornings, hitting snooze just feels way more rewarding in the moment?
Exactly. Our brains are wired for that instant gratification. So that's where this tool comes in, habit tracking. It helps bridge that gap.
Habit tracking, huh? So you're talking about those apps where you check off a box every day, you stick to your habit.
That's one way to do it, yeah. It might seem super simple, but honestly, don't underestimate the power of a visual reminder. Each check mark, it's like a mini victory, a little boost to remind you of your progress.
So it's like a visual reminder that I'm actually doing this, I'm making progress, even if it doesn't feel like a big dramatic change.
Exactly. Remember that ice cube analogy from before? Tracking your habits? It helps you see that the temperature is rising, even if you haven't hit that melting point yet.
Okay, that makes sense. I can see that. It's like having a scorecard, to see how far I've come.
Exactly. Plus, there's another little psychological trick at play here. Loss aversion. We're naturally wired to avoid losing something we've already gained, right? So when you see that streak of check marks building up, you're way less likely to break it. It becomes its own source of motivation.
It's like, I've come this far, I'm not giving up now. Got to keep that streak alive. I can see that working.
It's powerful stuff. And sometimes even just that simple visual cue can make all the difference. Clear even talked about this really old school method of moving paper clips from one jar to another to track progress. Like each paper clip represents a rep at the gym or a page written.
Ooh, I like that. It's like you're physically building your success one paperclip at a time.
Exactly. It makes it tangible.
Yeah.
And speaking of making things more concrete, remember how we talked about reframing earlier? We can use that same strategy to make our habits even more rewarding.
Okay, remind me about reframing in this context. How does that work again?
So instead of focusing all your energy on how hard something is, you shift your attention to the positive feelings you experience during the activity itself. Like let's say you're learning a new language, right? Instead of fixating on how much you don't know or how difficult the grammar is, what if you focus on the feeling of accomplishment when you understand a new phrase, or the excitement of being able to connect with people in a different culture?
Ooh, I like that. It's like finding those moments of flow where you're so engaged in what you're doing that everything else just fades away.
That's exactly it. And the more you focus on those positive feelings, the more you reinforce that habit loop in your brain. It's like you're training your brain to associate that activity with pleasure, which makes you more likely to stick with it even when things get tough.
Okay, this is all making so much sense. So we're tracking our habits, we're reframing our thinking, we're riding that wave of motivation. What's next? What's the final piece of the puzzle?
The last piece, and this is key, is reflection. Clear talks about how important it is to regularly review your habits. See what's working, what's not, and make adjustments as needed.
Ah, so it's not just a set it and forget it kind of thing. I actually have to be engaged in the process, making little tweaks along the way.
Yep. Think of it like a scientist conducting an experiment. You gather data, analyze the results, and then use that information to refine your approach. In fact, Clear talks about Eliud Kipchoge, the world record marathon runner, in his book. And get this, even he, at the very top of his game, keeps detailed notes after every single run, analyzing his performance, seeing what he can tweak and improve.
Wow. Okay, that is commitment. And honestly, kind of inspiring. It's like no matter how good we get, there's always room to grow and improve, right?
100%. And that's the beauty of the whole atomic habits philosophy.
Yeah.
It's not about being perfect. It's about continuous improvement. Those small but consistent efforts, those tiny changes, they really do add up to remarkable results in the long run.
This whole deep dive has been amazing. We've covered so much ground, from the nitty-gritty science of habit formation, that four-step loop, to all those super practical strategies like cue optimization, temptation bundling, the 2-minute rule, and then, not forgetting about tracking, reframing, and reflection. Phew.
My brain is definitely full in the best way possible. And the best part is it's all actionable. Anyone listening can start applying these principles today, like right now. They can literally start designing their ideal life one small habit at a time. How amazing is that?
It's empowering. And on that note, as we wrap up our deep dive into atomic habits, I want to leave you with one final thought. Now that you have this knowledge, what's one habit you want to focus on? Whether it's building a new one or finally breaking free from one that's been holding you back. Remember, even the smallest change, when you repeat it consistently, can create some truly remarkable results in your life. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the incredible power of habit. Until next time.